Hi, everybody. Welcome to our live virtual Bay Area law firm info and networking session. This is a great way, another great episode in our Summer Associate Hub live virtual show, location series, where students can learn about what it's like to work as a big law attorney in different locations. We have a fantastic panel of attorneys today. I'm excited to get into it. My name is Albert from Summer Associate Hub, and happy to have you. So the agenda is as follows. We'll have a panel discussion featuring our attorneys from Goodwin, Willkie, and Perkins Coie. That will be about 30 to 40 minutes, including Q&A. After the panel discussion, each firm will host a separate Zoom room for those who want to join, ask questions, or listen to hear more about the firm. In the meantime, you can use the Q&A function to ask questions to the panel generally, and we'll make sure to have time for any good questions at the end. Before we wrap up the panel discussion, we'll also have some prize raffles, which is probably the most fun part of these sessions throughout the last couple of weeks. Each firm has sponsored some very fun firm swag. Nothing's better than firm swag, and you have to be present to win. So we'll send the link in the chat for you to sign up for the raffle. And if you sign up, you are risking the chance of your name being called out on air for you to win the prize. So don't go anywhere. All right, so happy to have you all here. Before we jump in, quick intro. What is Summer Associate Hub? Summer Associate Hub is a free content and resource hub for law students embarking on the 1L and 2L recruiting process. I'm a former law student, big law associate. We know from our own experience here how hard it is as a 1L to understand what it's really like to work at a law firm. Our platform, summerassociatehub.com, has blog posts, podcast episodes, short video tutorials and exercises, interviews with attorneys, and other content to help you learn about practice areas, office locations, and prepare for the recruiting process. We also host live virtual programs. You know about those because you're watching one right now, where students can easily learn directly from and network with law firm attorneys and recruiting team members. We have a ton of awesome program schedules for the spring. We've already had a few awesome ones, which are recorded and on our website. That includes a whole series about practice areas and a series about office locations. So you could learn all about those things and prepare for the recruiting process and network. We're also in the process of planning an in-person networking event this summer in New York City, so stay tuned for that as well if you're interested in that. The link to RSVP for our upcoming sessions will be posted in the chat. We have our Chicago location showcase this Monday and our real estate practice area showcase next Tuesday, and a few other ones coming after that. So I'll send the link in the chat for those of you to sign up. The best way to sign up and stay updated is our newsletter, summerassociatehub.com/newsletter. If you're signed on for this event, you've already been added, and share it with your 1L classes, all different free prizes for making referrals. All right, so let's get into it. This will be a fun one. I am from the East Coast. It's always freezing, and every time I go to California, I wonder why I don't live there. So we're going to hear more about what it's like to live there and work there tonight with this all-star panel. So instead of me introducing everyone, I'll let everybody introduce themselves. So I guess tell us briefly about yourself, your practice, and why you chose to practice law in the Bay Area. Emma, let's start with you.
Hi, everyone. My name's Emma Mann-Meginniss. I'm a partner in our tech group based in San Francisco at Goodwin Proctor. So interesting, I'm actually from New York City originally, born and raised, never thought I would leave New York. You're a New Yorker always through and through. But came out here for law school, kind of fell in love with the Bay Area, fell in love with the tech ecosystem. What I do now is work with, you'll hear people call it an ECVC practice, emerging company venture capital. It's kind of a silly acronym. I think of it as supporting an ecosystem of innovation. So companies and people who invest in those companies that want to disrupt different industries. So anything from healthcare, I have kind of a specific focus in healthcare and health tech companies, to Gen AI and the new Open AI and all of the things that come with that, or just traditional publishing. I have a bunch of clients that are in that realm, media, digital media. So really runs the gamut, and I work across the industry, but working on both sides, both the company side, informing those companies and supporting them through their life cycles, and then working with the investors that put money into them to help them grow.
Great. Barrington, on to you.
Sure. Thanks, Albert. So hi, everyone. I'm Barrington Dyer. I'm a partner in the IP group, litigation group, in the litigation group and the IP group at Willkie, Farr, and Gallagher. Essentially, what I do is I help tech companies resolve technology disputes, whether that's patent infringement, whether it's trade secret misappropriation, or whether it's just a simple contract dispute involving technology. And really the reason I chose San Francisco and the Bay Area in particular is the very similar reasons that Emma did. I wanted to be close to the tech ecosystem. And obviously one of the major perks of being close to the tech system is it's all based in California. So obviously getting all the benefits of California sunshine and weather, which are also added incentives as well.
Fantastic. Jason, on to you.
Yep. I'm Jason Schneiderman, a partner here at Perkins Coie. I'm a second generation startup lawyer. I do pretty much what Emma does in the emerging company venture capital group, working with entrepreneurs, growing their ideas all the way through their liquidity event. And besides the weather and being born here, the tech and the innovation and the really diverse community that we have here keeps me here. So, yeah.
Great. So I guess we'll go around the horn to hear from all of you. I guess in your practice, what are the clients and industries that make up the Bay Area legal market specifically, and how does your location within the Bay Area specifically play into your practice? So, I guess Emma, let's start with you. So you work in ECVC corporate with healthcare companies. Tell us more about that and what that looks like for the legal industry in the Bay Area for you.
Yeah, so I do have a lot of healthcare companies. I'm the co-chair of our women's health and wellness practice at Goodwin. I also have, like I said, companies that are kind of what I would call your sort of run-of-the-mill SaaS company, software as a service. So anytime you use a software program on the internet, or an app, that's probably a quintessential SaaS company. I think Silicon Valley itself, if you kind of go back historically, came out of the semiconductor industry, right? And there's a lot of focus on defense. There's also a lot of focus on having kind of new and improved processes for industry. Where it's gone and where it's iterated is in Google and AI and all of these other industries. To me, the coolest part about this, what I do and about being in the Bay Area, is that what's cool today is probably passé tomorrow, and you're going to learn something new every year, every 10 years. I've gone through crypto, I've gone through AI, I've gone through, I'm sure Jason can speak to the same thing, and Barrington probably as well, sort of seen all these industries come and go, and you get to really be on the front lines of dealing with new innovation. I think healthcare, and why I've sort of developed that focus for myself in the last couple of years, healthcare itself is ripe for innovation, and there's been a lot of new stuff coming out from both the West Coast and frankly from the East Coast in health tech, innovating everything from how doctors deal with their patients and keep records to, how do we as consumers go and find healthcare? If you're out here or on the East Coast, I'm sure you've been to or seen a One Medical. That itself is kind of a tech-based platform. So it's anything, everything, vertical, horizontal, and diagonal, I guess.
Jason, what about you working with companies, digital media, gaming, and other related industries?
Yeah, broadly, every kind of tech is here in Silicon Valley, from starting off with semiconductors to digital media, sports, and entertainment. What's really fascinating is that these emerging companies are intersecting with each other. So the technology is cross platforms. So for example, like crypto into gaming, or SaaS companies with XYZ, or AI into kind of everything again. So it's really fascinating because we're all on the kind of cutting edge of these sort of legal questions as they butt up with this technology that's innovating. And so Barrington, Emma, and I, and the folks here in Silicon Valley really get like the cutting edge questions, the cutting edge clients, and really have to sort of think through how that impacts the law. And so there really is just like a broad and deep tech stack in Silicon Valley. Things that in healthcare right now, it's like actually one of the big things that Emma was talking about is really ripe for innovation as well.
Great, Barrington. What about you working litigation for IP matters?
Yeah, so my client base is very much on brand with what kind of Emma and Jason talked about. Historically, Silicon Valley has very much had a focus on semiconductors. So a lot of the work that I've done is focused around semiconductors, but in the last, 10, 15, 20 years, there's very much been a shift to software and consumer products, right? So the Metas, the Googles, the Amazons, I mean, all of these companies have major presence and footprints, both in San Francisco and in Silicon Valley. And so, that tends to be the client base, right? And what ends up resulting from that is a lot of cutting edge issues that kind of Emma and Jason talked about, right? I mean, we've seen, up until recently, there very much was a heavy emphasis on crypto and NFTs, and that's where a lot of the disputes and issues and interesting questions were coming up. Now it's all about generative AI and copyright issues, data privacy around that, all of those things. So, one of the great things about being planted in San Francisco or Silicon Valley is that you're close to all the companies and all the clients where these issues are being raised. And so you tend to get pulled into these types of matters. And then in terms of the types of clients, I mean, I represent everything from, Fortune 500 tech companies to, startups that are owned by private equity firms. So it really runs the gamut in terms of the type of client, but kind of like the through line in all of them is really interesting questions around law and technology, whether it be software or hardware.
Fascinating. So before we move on to the next question, just a reminder, everyone, so all the attorneys on our panel are going to be hosting breakout rooms with some of the recruiting folks at the firms after this discussion. So we posted a Word document in the chat that has all the breakout room links. If you definitely download that Word document so you have the links, I just sent it again. And if you have any trouble, once in a while, folks have trouble on these sessions with the Word document. If you have any trouble, just respond to the email that you got with your Zoom link, and we can get you set up after the panel's over. All right, so moving on. So we have a few different firms on the call right now. Some of the firms are based, I guess one firm is based on the West Coast, and then some are based on the other coast. So I guess, Jason, let's start with you. Tell us a bit more of what it's like to work for a firm that's headquartered on the West Coast, and what that's like in your seat in Palo Alto.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things, I guess, for like a law school student to kind of know. If you're looking for a firm, there's going to have their headquarters in a location, and then they're going to have satellite offices. And it's going to be a bit of a different experience working in the HQ versus sort of a satellite office. And for us, our main headquarters is based in Seattle. That's where we grew out of, and we have sort of a West Coast vibe and sort of a Seattle feel to it. And so one, that kind of creates the culture within the firms where they kind of start from. And then two, I picked Perkins specifically for having kind of a smaller office because I wanted to grow with it over the 20 years, which was a fantastic experience. So I was growing not only our office, but I was growing startups at the same time. And so it is one of our main hubs, San Francisco and Palo Alto. So having that kind of dominance in the area, we have a lot of brand name, get a lot of clients, but with that. But yeah, it's just sort of where our culture came from. And I guess what I would sort of say to like students is, meet the people at all these various firms. One, find a firm that does the work you want to do, and then hopefully in the location you want to be in, and then meet the people there and figure out if you like those people. Because like myself, and I think everyone on the phone here, if you really like it, you're working a lot with those people for quite a long time, and so the culture is an important thing. And ours is sort of a Pacific Northwest kind of feel to it versus maybe like a New York kind of office feel.
Yeah, so I guess Emma and Barrington, you're the firms that you're at are headquartered on the East Coast. So tell us a little bit more about what that's like from your seat on the West Coast. I guess Emma, let's start with you.
Sure. So Goodwin is a Boston-based firm, and I remember sitting in the shoes of law students who I can't see, but I'm sure you're out there somewhere, trying to figure out, do you want to be in sort of the HQ, or do you want to be in, as Jason called it, a satellite office? To me, the big thing to understand as you're weighing those choices and sort of looking at firms is the size of the offices. So for example, our headquarters in Boston has 470-ish attorneys. Our San Francisco office has over 100. So about a quarter of the size, but by no means like 3 people in a WeWork space. There are firms out there that will say, here's the list of 35 offices that we have that literally have 2 people in a country. So I would look at, whether the office itself has its own vibe. I can tell you, we definitely do. Also, what's interesting about Goodwin that I think is a little different than some East Coast firms that have moved west, is that we have a huge presence in tech. So in what I do, out on the West Coast. And so I think also you need to look at practice areas. So sometimes you'll say, okay, well, there's a giant office in LA, but it's got, one person who does tech, one person who does real estate, one person does litigation. And in the aggregate, it's basically one big office with a bunch of tiny little satellite offices. That's not really how we've grown or how we operate. I think the third thing that's a little bit different about Goodwin that does affect that sort of vibe overall is that our chairman actually is from our West Coast office. So that's new and pretty different from some of those East Coast firms, new for Goodwin too. It's a change this year, but it has, I think, affected the vibe overall of the firm. We also have huge offices in the UK, and we have a great office in Paris that I love visiting. So there are benefits to global reach too.
Can't guarantee we're going to have a Paris location showcase at Summer Associate anytime soon, but that does sound lovely. Barrington, tell us what it's like in your seat with Willkie based in New York.
Yeah, so Willkie is obviously, it's a New York-based firm. They've got 3 major offices here in California, San Francisco, Palo Alto, and Los Angeles. In terms of what it's like to be on the West Coast location of a New York-based firm, for me at Willkie, it's been pretty much seamless. The only real difference I find is, where you work obviously kind of sets the work culture, right? So New York has a very different work culture than California, than DC. And so you should think about when you're trying to decide where you want to land, also kind of like, what's the work culture? Do you want to work in an office where, when you leave in the evening, you want to go grab drinks with folks or dinner, or, do you want to kind of, leave the office park and then, drive home? So it kind of sets the work culture. But the other thing to consider too is really the culture of the firm, right? That's a huge important part of the puzzle. And, I've worked for, Willkie is based in New York, but I've also worked for a firm. The first firm I worked for was actually based in San Francisco. But, culturally, I found that they were very similar. I mean, the things that I've always been drawn to are people that take their work seriously, but don't take themselves seriously. And I just feel like that's always made for a really great, positive work environment. And so ultimately, I think it comes down to the culture. And so it's not such a matter of whether the office is based in New York or DC or California, but what's kind of like the overall culture of that firm.
Yeah, that's great advice. So I would love everyone's thoughts on this one. What has it been like for you, I guess, living in the Bay Area? I think it's obviously important for folks to know what it's like to work in the Bay Area and what the clients are like. I think it's also a consideration for a lot of students considering the Bay Area is what it's like to live there. So what has it been like for you living in the Bay Area as a young professional or with a family? I guess tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, well, I'll start because I'm born and raised here. The one nice thing is the kind of the social culture outside the office, and the people I meet and interact with. They're all really interesting people, and so I have kids, and one kind of a good example is that on the playground when I was sort of watching my kids, I'd be sitting there talking to another mom or dad, and they just happen to be a well-known venture capitalist or an entrepreneur or things like that, and we just have interesting conversations. And I just think that's part of like the ecosystem here is you just are kind of living your life, but you're also in the mix of these really interesting people like ourselves, trying to just innovate and help people out and move technology and our clients forward. And so I just think that in Silicon Valley, you just have a lot of opportunities just to kind of interact with people with similar interests and what you're trying to do on a relatively easy basis. So that's been my general experience growing up here, is just that there's a lot of really interesting people that you just generally meet, biking, hiking, playground, going out to dinner. Yeah, so it's very nice in my sense. I don't know about Emma.
Yeah, so I think I don't know if it's a unique perspective, but maybe just a different perspective, having not grown up here, but also having grown up in a really big city. I loved growing up in New York, but there's no intimacy about the number of people that you see on a daily basis in New York. I think the cool thing, kind of to Jason's point about the Bay Area, is that yes, it is a city. I would have disagreed with that when I first came out here, but it is in fact a city. But it's small. It is relatively small in terms of the number of people. It's relatively small in terms of the size of the city. You have you have the South Bay, so Palo Alto, Silicon Valley area, which is a pretty easy drive from the city itself. I live in Oakland in the East Bay, kind of in the hills. So I have access to trails where I take my dogs every weekend. We take our daughter to the park right down the street from my house. There are two options. We can walk to both. We can walk to the farmer's market on the weekends. I see people on a regular basis that I actually know from work, which is both weird and not weird, depending on what state of mind you're in, that when I'm just walking around with my husband and our dogs and, with our kid. So I think you have a lot of sort of like-minded people, a lot of young professionals. But the cool thing for me anyway, and why I chose to stay in the Bay Area versus to go back to New York, was that it felt like I had access to all of these options. So you have a city, you have a financial center, you have access to restaurants and culture and, museums, shows, whatever you want to do on the weekends or in your, evenings. But you also have houses that you can live in that are, give you more space, access to the outdoors, and surrounded by people that I think want to do all of those things. Because I do think it's a group of like-minded people who live here. Differences, yes, but also want to have a full life. I don't know, Barrington, if you feel the same.
Yeah, I agree with everything Jason and Emma articulated. I guess I would just add, the great thing I find about the Bay Area is there's a lot of different options in terms of like just where you want to live. So, depending on the type of scene that you're drawn to, right? If you're drawn to a city type scene, you obviously have San Francisco. If you want something that's a little bit more, laid back, you obviously have the South Bay, you've got the East Bay and the North Bay. So there's a lot of different options in terms of just, the living, in terms of where you want to live. The public transportation is fairly good in the Bay Area. So there's lots of options there. The other thing I'll say that's interesting about living and working in the Bay Area is that because the main industry is tech, there tends to be, I find, as opposed to like, say, Southern California where it's entertainment or New York where it's very heavy in finance. We obviously have those things here too, but because it's very focused on tech, there tends to be a lot of optimism about the future and about this kind of endless sense of possibility. And I have to say, it's really refreshing and also very energizing to just be around that. Like literally any coffee shop you go to, someone is talking about, they're pitching their company or they're coming up with new ideas or, it just seems like there's always things happening. And there's just something, intoxicating about that, just being around that type of energy and optimism.
Yeah.
I
don't know. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
One last thing real quick is that the Bay Area is a place where I say you kind of live outside. Like you have your doors open, you go hiking out with the dogs, it's not super humid, so you're not locked in during the summers, and it's not super cold, so you're not locked in so much during the winter. So that's just one other thing about Silicon Valley and the Bay Area is that people tend to be, connected to the outside more. So.
Yeah, no, that's all great, and it just makes me even more jealous of the California lifestyle. Hearing all this. Okay, so one thing I want to hear about is exit opportunities. So for law students, exit opportunities is the term that we use to think about. Okay, when you're at a law firm and thinking about your next step, not everybody stays at a law firm forever, and that could look a few different ways. So what are some common exit opportunities for big law attorneys in the Bay Area within your practice area? So I guess Barrington, let's start with you in terms of IP litigation. What do the exit opportunities look like within this region?
Yeah, I mean, you know, the kind of the obvious one is to go in-house, right? I mean, every major tech company, every startup needs in-house counsel. And depending on the size of the company, they likely have litigation counsel. They have an entire department of litigation counsel, right? You know, if you're a really small company, you maybe have one attorney that wears many hats, but as the company grows, there's a need for, you know, different types of litigation counsel. Sometimes it's product counsel where you work with product teams and kind of figure out what are the issues for a particular product. Maybe it's, you know, very specific to a certain type of litigation. It could be IP litigation, could be, you know, anything. So there's always a need for in-house. But I think even beyond that, if you think even more broadly, I mean, the skill set you learn as a litigator is very much one surrounded around risk assessment. So there's lots of folks that have gone on from being litigators to being, you know, completely different roles, wearing completely different hats at a company, whether that's, you know, as a VP or something else. So I think there's a lot of options, but the most obvious one I think the most people think of is, you know, just simply going in-house.
Nice. Emma, what do you think in the industry that you work in?
Yeah, I think it's the same. I mean, going in-house is probably the most common example. You know, exit opportunity, it's really like, what are you doing after BigLaw, I guess. There are a whole host of other law firms out there. So we do sometimes see people go to smaller firms for whatever reason. Maybe that's a specialist firm. I actually know a lot of people that I work with, frankly, that have gone out and hung out a shingle on their own, and they've decided, I want to do this one thing over and over that I know how to do for my days at Goodwin or my days at Perkins or wherever. And so I'm going to go do it and sort of on my own scale and with a lot more independence than comes with being at a law firm. So I think, you know, the cool thing about being in the Bay Area is that you are exposed to all these different opportunities. And I don't know, I see people do things I would never have expected and couldn't have predicted. I also see a lot of people leave the law because they go in-house, they're the GC for about 30 seconds, and then they're like, you know, it's kind of cool to be CEO, so I'll just go do this other thing. So you also are exposed to opportunities that you might not have thought about in terms of ability to use your law degree. I think we think about it in a narrow way, but in my mind, law school teaches you a way to think, and a way to think critically about risk, about problems that arise, about, you know, business situations. And what I try to tell my clients is I am your outside business legal advisor, but business that comes first. I'm not just telling you what the law says. I'm trying to help you figure out how to manage a situation. So you can do that on the business side, or you can do that on the legal side. And I think that is an avenue, if you come and do some of this kind of work, that you might decide to pursue. I've never done it myself, so grain of salt here, but you could do that.
Yeah. I mean, when we hire people, we try to hope they get to partnership and give them the resources to get there. But statistically speaking, people do leave for other reasons. And the main one is sometimes the stars just align on a client, and then the client, you know, entices them over, and then they make a hell of a lot more money than I will ever see in my 20 years of practice. And I'm, you know, happy for them and that it's worked out well. But like the great thing about just a law degree is you can literally go do anything with it, I think. And so as Emma kind of mentioned it, like general counsel, business, CEOs, legal recruiting, you know, we've had a few go back to their alma maters and help recruiting there. Yeah, the knowledge you get kind of at a law firm, and I think in corporate especially, you really kind of need to go to a nice firm to kind of learn that, because you know, you can take so many classes at law school, but you really should get into a law firm and kind of learn the trade a bit. But you can do a ton of stuff. You know, international travel. One of my favorite associates, you know, did a bunch of international travel, then a GC, and then now is back. So after 20 years, but like 7 years here, and then with another firm internationally, and then worked for a satellite company, and it was yeah, so exciting.
Yeah, so that's all. That's a really insightful, and I think it's hard in your shoes right now as a 1L to think about kind of the step after the next step, but it's important to know what's out there in a long-term career, and you never know where it's going to end up. So that those are really great insights. Okay, so I think let's take a couple questions and then we can move on to our last question and before we move to the breakout room. So we have one good question here. And just a reminder to everybody, if you have any questions, this is your last chance, pop it into the Q&A. One good question, how can students on the East Coast who are interested in Bay Area offices stay engaged with the West Coast summer associate market? Do any of you have any insights there?
I think,
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, you know, a lot of schools have organizations that kind of tap into the West Coast market. And so if your school has one of those, would definitely recommend kind of getting involved and getting engaged. I know at Goodwin, you know, we try to do Q&As at East Coast schools, and we try to provide a lot of information on our website for talent acquisition. So take a look at those resources too, at the specific firms that you may be interested in. I know sometimes the big question mark is which firms should I be interested in? Hopefully your legal recruiting office can help kind of steer you in that direction. But there's also, you know, good resources. Primary mode of, this is not malpractice, I promise, but primary mode of legal research is Google. So Googling, you know, what are the big firms on the West Coast in the specific areas, in BigLaw, in, you know, Bay Area, et cetera, can be helpful in kind of drilling down.
Yeah. One other thing, I think all the firms that are represented on this call have East and West Coast offices. So if you do end up summering in the East Coast, you might want to check to see exposure to West Coast deals and things like that. I know for our like ECVC group, we really try to have a national platform. And so we make sure that our associates are exposed to East Coast deals, West Coast deals, Austin deals, Seattle deals. And so they're getting the sense of those markets. And so every firm is a little bit different on how they kind of run their summer programs, but that's one way just to see if they have the offices and also if they kind of encourage or discourage kind of, you know, working with other offices or teams.
Yeah, that's great. All right, so we're gonna move on to, and by the way, I should mention, if you're on the East Coast and you're in this session, I think you're already on the right track for staying engaged with the Bay Area summer associate market, because this is a great way to do so. So you're already doing the right thing. All right, so we're going to move on to our last question. And while we're doing that, we're also going to give away some free prizes before we move to the breakout room. So this is my favorite part. This is the last question. Now's the chance for everybody to plug their firm. So we're going to go around the horn in 30 seconds or less. You know, why should someone choose your firm? Our rule here at Summer Associate Hub is you're not allowed to say it to the people. As law students will see throughout the process this spring, the answer seems to always be the people. Every firm, it's about the people. So we encourage our panelists here to go a little bit of a level deeper and give us some other insights. So, all right, Jason, let's start with you. 30 seconds or less. Why should someone choose? Why should a student choose Perkins Coie?
Yeah, two reasons. One is we're a broad platform, so we have a lot of practice areas. And then two, we do a ton of work on mentoring, training summer associates and associates. So like we really dive into the skill sets and make sure you guys have a robust summer and actually have actual skill sets you can take away after the summer.
Great. And we stayed within 30 seconds. I love that. All right, so we have a Perkins Coie branded LL Bean backpack. That's the fun raffle or fun prize we're giving away. All right, so we're gonna pick the winner of that one very shortly. All right. So Meredith Johnson, if you're here, please let us know in the Q&A. All right, moving on. So Emma, 30 seconds or less. Why should a student choose Goodwin?
I'm not allowed to say the people, so I'm not going to say the people, but I will say the collegiality, I think, is a huge thing, which probably implies the people, but I'm a lawyer, whatever. I think it's, you know, the way that we interact with each other is unique. I think it's a group that does invest in the people. So it's not the people themselves, again, sorry. But the way that we invest in our people, in mentorship, in making sure people have lives. And there's this kind of concept that goes out there all the time about work-life balance. I'm a firm believer that if your work is distinct from your life in your mind, you will be miserable, whether you are walking dogs all day or, you know, doing what we do every day. It needs to be something that you like and that you want to come bring home, you know, in your mind. It's something that makes you proud of what you do and who you are. And we try to figure out how people fit within our sort of Goodwin umbrella, our Goodwin family to do that, and also have boundaries so that you can go walk your dogs on your your day off and go on a hike and play with your kids and have your hobbies. I have mine. So I think that's a big thing. The second thing I would say is opportunity. When I started at Goodwin, it was 600 people, and now we're over 1,600. But with that has come a tremendous amount of opportunity and investment, again, in the people. So investment in new leadership and investment in different areas of practice. You're interested in cannabis, we created a cannabis group. You're interested in crypto, we've done that because people wanted to do that.
Great. All right, so Goodwin, we have probably the most unique swag prize we've given out this during this series, an Apple AirTag case, Apple AirTag N case, which is always helpful especially when you're luggage and everything like that. So, all right, let's see. Jenna Smith, if you're here, let us know. You win the special Apple AirTag and Goodwin holding case. All right, Barrington, on to you. Finish us off. 30 seconds or less. Why should a student choose Willkie?
Yeah, I think students should choose Willkie if you're interested in a firm with a fast-growing West Coast presence. The San Francisco office, for example, we started out with just 2 attorneys a little more than 3 years ago. Now we're 40, so we're rapidly expanding. I think you should consider Willkie if you're interested in cutting-edge legal issues, if you're interested in working in really interesting privacy issues, really interesting AI issues, really interesting crypto issues, really interesting intellectual property issues. And I would say take a look at Willkie if you value hybrid work, but you want a really vibrant office culture as well. Great to have the flexibility of working at home, but also really great to have colleagues that you can look to in the office, to have mentorship opportunities in the office as well. So I would say if that's something that's important to you, that you like both the flexibility of hybrid work, but also having mentorship and value kind of office culture, definitely give Willkie San Francisco a look as well.
Fantastic. And we have a Willkie sponsored tote bag with some other firm swag items packed in there. All right, Danielle Dyson, if you're here, let us know before we wrap up, and we'll get that sent to you. All right, cool. Well, thanks to this wonderful panel for all these great insights into working and living in the Bay Area. We encourage everyone to join the breakout rooms. Thanks to everybody for taking time out of their evening. One thing I always like to mention to law students, try to bounce around from breakout room to breakout rooms, hear from different folks, different perspectives, different thoughts. Don't just sit in one and hang out there the whole night. Hopefully you can, especially as attorneys taking time out of their evening, bounce around and say hello and hear from everybody on the panel. The Zoom links were posted in the chat. I'm going to send it one more time just so everyone could download it before we finish up. If you have any trouble at all, just let us know in the email that you got our confirmation email from, and we'll get you those links. So looking forward to seeing you all in the breakout rooms. Thanks again to Jason, Emma, and Barrington for this wonderful discussion. And thanks everybody for joining.
Thank you all.
Thanks all. Thanks, Albert.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.